how much folks were just empathetic to this work around racial equity. And as I was reading to the chat and the commitments that folks had made of things that they were going to try to do in their own liminal spaces, I was really left inspired. And so out of just curiosity and, in that same spirit, I just want to invite you to use the chat window and input anything that you may have, you have tried in your classroom since the beginning of the quarter, something new, something different that you've tried in an effort to advance racial equity. I just think it will be just great for all of us to see the different things that we've been trying to do in our own spaces to move the needle forward. And so while that is happening, I also, let's see, let me go back to the screen here. And while you're inputting that, I want to formally do a land acknowledgement. So if you would join with me in a moment of just silence as I read the land acknowledgement. South Puget Sound Community College sits on the traditional lands of the Medicine Creek Treaty Tribes, which includes Squaxin Island and Nisqually Indian Tribe. The 1854 treaty ceding these lands is still in dispute. All who are not Salish peoples are visitors here. With this awareness, we pay respect to elders, past and present, of the Medicine Creek Treaty Tribes and all Native peoples. One of the reasons why I genuinely value the land acknowledgement protocol is because it is a reminder of the dynamics of racism and how there is this process of usurping something or suffocating the voice of some at the benefit of others. And so being able to do a land acknowledgement forces us to get into that space in our heads about how do we, one, acknowledge, but two, restore going forward. How do we ensure that we create dynamics that shift the initial injustice? And so as we read the acknowledgement, I know sometimes it can feel like, okay, we're going through the motions, but really the invitation here is to get us into that state of mind and thinking about how do we make right of what has been wrong in the beginning. And so it's in that spirit that I want us to kind of dive into the rest of our time. And so the goals concretely for our time today, 3 main bullet points. The first one is to continue the work that we've started in trying to create community around this anti-racism and equity work. Because as we build community, as we break up those silos and come together, sharing stories and packing these topics, it really helps us feel like we are one. We are together in this work. And it helps with not feeling like some are committed to this and others aren't. And so really what we're trying to do through this series and that we really committed to continuing doing is creating that community sense that we really want to make a difference in our community and we're coming together to do that. And part of doing that, some of the feedback that we got from the 2 previous sessions has been a lot of folks have said, we got to keep this going. We got to continue having conversations because we are all at different places on the spectrum. Some of us have been dealing with racial inequalities and inequities for our lifetimes, and others are just coming into the realization of how pervasive these issues are, and we are all over the map with that. And so by continuing to have conversations and challenging ourselves, it's helping all of us build competency and be a support to one another as we try to move the institution forward in being a leader in our community. And so to do that today, some of the questions and discussions that Erin is going to help us with will help us understand better and see some of the intersectionalities of what it is like to be minoritized in a dominant group, to be a minority in a dominant group, and how that creates this sentiment of one cannot breathe. And so if you all been obviously keeping up with the news, one major mantra of the protests, and if you see the signs, the boards, on the news has been that statement, "I cannot breathe." It's been reiterated not only in a literal fashion when we think about the death of George Floyd, but then also figuratively as people of color have been talking about their experiences in spaces where they feel like they cannot breathe. So what we want to try to do today is really unpack that. What does it mean? What is that experience like when one feels like you cannot breathe? And I do believe that we all have intersectionality there in ways that we may have in our journey experienced that, and try to create connection points of empathy with that as we continue our work towards dismantling racism. So that's our goal today. We're going to unpack what does it mean to not being able to breathe. And to do that, Erin's going to help us out, but I wanted to share one last quote before I let Erin help us out with this conversation. The better you understand the complexities, imperfections, and pain points within your own story, the more you begin to extend empathy to others. It's a quote that really resonated a lot with me. I like to share it in more spaces where I go, because when we talk about equity work, when we talk about racial equity work, or the broader conversation around equity, providing or restoring resources and services based on distinctive needs of groups or individuals, based on the historical context or the situations in which they're in. When we try to do that work, it's so critical for us to do an examination work. It starts at home. It starts with ourselves. What is our story? What are our pain points in our stories? What are those areas of imperfections? Because when we are in touch with those, it softens our hearts, our senses to be more attuned to when we come into contact with others who are operating differently or dealing with different situations, so that we can respond in a very empathetic way. So a lot of the work we're going to be doing today, the conversation we'll be having today, is really going to be around inviting you to look inward, look back to some of your story, and where there might have been some pain points that may help you understand, by extension, how other minority groups, and whenever there's intersectionality, where other minority groups are having those pain points as it relates to the broader topic of I cannot breathe. So with that, I want to invite in here Erin, my friend, co-facilitator, co-leader in this community in DI work, to walk us through the journey for the rest of the time.
Thank you, Parfait. I'm glad to be with you all again. It's always fun to be able to do not just one event, but to be with groups for over the long haul. So I feel really honored to be here today with you. As Parfait was talking about, I can't breathe. When schools were closed, most of my work is in K-12 education. When schools are closed, even before George Floyd, I had a number of Black and Brown educators in the K-12 system call me at some point in April after Ahmaud Arbery had been killed and after we learned of Breonna Taylor, and they said, Erin, wow, this is the first time I feel like I can breathe, being outside the system, being at home, not being surrounded by the heaviness of whiteness. And this is even before George Floyd. I had lots of friends call, and so I created a space on Saturday for K-12 educators to just come and be. And so when George Floyd was killed and we began to hear these stories of I can't breathe, then I did not watch the video. I'll be really honest. I couldn't watch the video. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We left there almost 50 years ago because of the way things were. So I just could not subject myself to that. But as I think about I can't breathe, and I think about the number of colleagues that I have who have said over the last few months, it feels good to just be able to breathe. And then we have the fires, right? And we can't breathe. And I'm a runner, so being stuck in my house for 2 weeks at a time without being able to leave my house, and even here in Lacey, I don't know how y'all were, but I had to wear my mask in my house for a couple of days. It was so bad, and so not being able to breathe. And then I remember the last day before the air cleared, I had to get outside. Like I just could not be inside anymore because I do race work, and so being in my house talking about race all day and not being able to leave that conversation was just, and I needed to get outside. And I remember I'm walking through my community in Lacey with my mask on, like hard to breathe even. And I think about the masks that we wear. So I want you to be thinking about the masks that you wear. And some of us have masks that we can't take off. Like I can't take this off. I can't take this off. Some of you have masks that you take off and you put back on, right? And I think about being a runner now. Man, running with a mask, I just can't. I can only walk with a mask. I cannot run with a mask. And I'm a great runner, but I can't run with a mask. It's just too much. But how often are we running with masks on? Like we're doing life with a mask on. And so when Parfait said we wanted to talk about I Can't Breathe, it was such a powerful reminder to me in this moment of how often, not just people of color, but I think about folks who are identify as members of the LGBTQIA community, as folks maybe who have a faith background or a religious background, particularly in this political environment, where they have to hide that, right? I think about, I spent a day on Friday with students in school spaces who are Muslim and who feel like they can't wear their hijab right now. And all the ways that we are wearing masks, or we're asking people to wear masks and not be able to breathe. One of the things that I believe, both as an athlete, but also as a teacher and a mother, is that if you can't come as your full self, we don't ever get your best self. If you can't come as your full self, we don't ever get your best self. And so really what intrigues me so much about today's conversation, because it's something that I believe for me personally, really passionately, is I believe my purpose in the world is to help people become their best selves. I absolutely believe that. That's why I taught middle school for so long, because so many people don't believe in middle school kids and don't like them very much. I do. I love middle school children, partly because they're in that transformational, like the crazy period. Middle school children are crazy. If you've never raised a middle school child, you may not understand this, but they're like this every day, like every second, they're like this. And I am right here. I'm right here, which is why I'm really good with them. They come in and want to tell me these crazy stories about what they did last night, which probably they didn't do. They just want to see the rise that they can get out of me. But I just stay right here. And I believe my greatest gift with middle school children is to be a mirror to reflect back to them their brilliance and their beauty. That was my, yeah, Melissa, I had 3 middle school children in middle school while I was teaching middle school. So top that one, okay? It was crazy town in my house. But I share that because I absolutely believe my gift as a teacher was helping children take off the masks, helping children realize that, you know what, you don't have to come to Miss Jones in a particular way. Like, I want you to come as you. I want you to see yourself as beautiful as you, whether you have autism, whether you are totally nerdy, whether you have bright red hair, or let's say you want to make it blue today. I want you to show up as your full self. And I think that's why I was a great teacher. But here's the thing. We have so many spaces that are not that don't allow people, adults or children, to show up as their full selves. And what it's doing is it's forcing people to wear masks. Right? And they can't be their full self. And that's why I think this moment in our nation is really important for us to acknowledge the ways that we are asking people to wear masks every day. If we really want America to be a great place, it means we got to take off the mask. Everybody's got to take off the masks. And we got to say, wow, what's underneath that mask? I may not agree with it, but it's beautiful. It's still beautiful. Like, I can acknowledge that it's not my beauty, but it's still beautiful. And I just, so today, as we wrestle with this, I want you to realize that there are some people around you who are feeling the pressure just for survival to wear a mask every day. Just for survival. They have to wear a mask every day. And it's not a mask that they can easily take off. It may not be a mask they can ever take off. Some people are really good at taking it off and putting it on. And so I just want to encourage us today, like the last time, to show up. This is a brave space. It's not a safe space. It's a brave space. I think having these conversations is not safe. Taking masks off in front of other people is not easy. but it requires some real bravery. And so I'm going to invite you into this brave space today. I'm going to invite you to take some risks as we go into breakout rooms in a little bit. I'm going to invite you to practice taking off your mask today, to practice that in this really brave space. Because if you can't take it off here, it's going to be really hard to take it off out there. This is your practice. I'm a basketball player, 40 years basketball player. This is your practice court right now. This is practice, not the game yet. We want to give you a brave space to be able to practice that. Realize as you listen to other people's stories today, their story may be absolutely different from yours. And you may not understand other people's stories today, but listen with curiosity and validate their story. Realize that even if it's totally different from yours, that doesn't make it invalid, just makes it different from yours. And so I want you to be willing to believe that there are different truths about how people are experiencing the world right now. Show grace for yourself and for other people. If you struggle today sharing your mask or talking about your mask, don't beat yourself up and don't share. If it's going to traumatize you, don't take off the mask. Okay, I'm not asking you to traumatize yourself. There's some folks that are in this space today that taking off a mask is just too much. It's too much. And so listen more, and just be with other people. I want to encourage bravery, but I don't want you to traumatize yourself. Right? So show grace for yourself and for others. Be curious. Above all things, I believe the greatest learning happens when we have a posture of curiosity, when we just show up and want to learn about other people. And so I want to offer that to you today. I want to remind you of 3 words that I use to center me as I talk about these conversations around race and equity: humility, humanity, and history. I show up today and I try to show up every day with the humility that I don't know it all, that I have not arrived yet, nor do I expect to ever arrive. This is a lifelong journey. That I'm an expert facilitator, but I'm not the expert in this. I am still learning right alongside you. And I can't do this work by myself, which is why I love being in partnership with Parfait, because we need to link arms. This work is so big and deep that we've got to link arms with other people. So that's humility. Humanity, every single one of you in this space is beautiful and brilliant. Every single one of you. And part of our beauty is that we are not the same. That's part of our beauty. And so I choose to believe that every human being with whom I have contact has something brilliant and beautiful to offer the world. And that's the humanity. And then the history, all of us have a story. All of us have a story. And your story may be more fascinating, more movie-like. That doesn't make it any better than anyone else's story. We each have a story, and each of our stories matter. And each of our stories brought us to this moment in time, brought you to this space today. And so being open to hearing other stories and listening to stories, but also to recognize that your institution has a history, a story. Our community has a story to it that has affected some people in different ways than others. And to be willing to push and learn and grow. We can't fix what we're not willing to face. And so today is another step in the process of being able to face our stories and to face the stories of those who exist around us so that we can begin that process of healing and transformation that's so needed right now, not just here, but across our country. I want to ask today that we've got some group facilitators today who will be, so each of your breakout rooms will be facilitated by a person. And one of the reasons we intentionally ask some people to lead is often our most minoritized members end up bearing the greatest burden in facilitating these conversations. And so we've tried to intentionally take the burden off the shoulders of those who already are bearing a huge weight. And so you will be facilitated by someone in your room. We want to encourage everyone to engage to the extent that you're able. Again, brave space. I want to encourage you, if you're someone that takes up a lot of space usually, really monitor that. Really check yourself. If you're someone that's typically quiet, be brave. This is an opportunity to be brave. But again, if you're feeling heavy in this moment, I think one of the interesting things about the last 6 months is I feel like I can only speak for me. I've been on a roller coaster. There are some weeks that are just like, I cannot do one more thing. With Ruth Bader Ginsburg dying and then Breonna Taylor verdict, like last week was a hot mess, y'all. My daughter, who's 24, called the day that Breonna Taylor verdict came out, actually the minutes after. And she said these words to me. My 24-year-old Black daughter, who's darker skinned than me. She's adopted. She hates being dark. I think she's growing into her dark skin, but she's always felt out of place. And she says these words to me. Does America love Black women? Does America love do they see us? And how do I even answer that question? How do I even honestly answer that question in the face of the Breonna Taylor verdict? Right? Like the one person who's held accountable is the one who missed the Black woman, right? And so I understand there are other details and all of that, but to have a 24-year-old call and that's the first thing she says, as a mom, how do you even, and I was a mess. I was a hot mess. I had to do 3 events after that call. And I was a hot mess. So some of you may be in that place where you're just a hot mess today and you're just here to just be here. So just be here, okay? That is enough. Just be here. Okay, but I want to encourage you to be really brave today. And here's the question that I want you to answer in your breakout rooms. Please introduce yourselves to one another. But here's the question that I want you to be thinking about, or the issue that I want you to be thinking about. When in your life has one of your identities made you feel like you couldn't breathe? So when have you felt like other people were using one of your identities as a weapon against you, maybe? They were using it as a knee in your neck. When have you felt the pressure with one of your identities to maybe make it small or invisible? When have you felt the pressure to put on a mask or to take a mask off? I want you to have conversations around when have you struggled with feeling like you couldn't breathe? And so just some examples of identity: gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, home language. There are lots of ways that we age, perceived age. There are lots of ways that we can feel pressure to wear masks, where we can feel pressure in spaces to have to hide one of our identities or make it small. And so that's the conversation that I want you to have in your breakout rooms today. Please introduce yourself. But then I want you to have a conversation about the masks that you wear and how that feels, and when you have felt at times in your life that you couldn't breathe for whatever reason. And let's be really brave and come back. If you could have someone in your group scribe for the group, or if you have someone with a photographic memory and you don't need to scribe, you just got it all. You got it like that. We'd like to have each group have a person who can come back and share with the group. If you could scribe, please, so that we have notes if we don't get to everybody. I would love to be able to get some feedback from you all. You have today a long time. We got a long time to do this. So we have 45 minutes today to do breakout rooms. We want it to really be heavy on you all sharing with one another today. So you are going to be broken out into rooms. Remember, you have a facilitator in your room that has already been assigned there. If you could have someone who would be willing to write and take notes, that would be really fabulous. I'm not sure who's breaking us out, but it is time for breakout rooms. Enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. Be brave.
Hi there. I guess this is our room. I felt like I didn't move to another room.
1 second, I'm getting you guys assigned. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay. No problem.
I thought
No
it was
worries.
like automatic. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's cool.
Hey, John. I'm going to move you to, they just moved to breakout rooms, so I'm going to go ahead and assign you to a room.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Nice long time with each other today. We had lots of time. I hope that was good for you. I always get to be with the best people. Oh, so y'all give me life. You give me life. So here's what I would love to do. We have some time, and I would like to give people from breakout rooms a chance to lift up what are some of the things that you talked about that you feel like would benefit other people to hear. I really absolutely believe that it is in our stories and the sharing of our stories that we find common ground, and that common ground becomes the bridge across which we can have the hard conversations. And so I think there is incredible power in lifting up stories and creating space for people to really get honest with each other, because we realize we have so much in common. Even though we may look different and see the world differently, there's also so much that we have in common that we never get to because we don't take the time to just sit with each other and share stories. So I want to create some space because there are so many of us on the call. If you could please hand raise feature. I'd love to hear from 4 or 5 people if you'd be willing to share out what were some of your top thoughts from your conversation that you just had. So use the hand raise feature. It should be under either the dots or participants, depending on what kind of computer you're on. It's a blue hand raise feature. So if you are interested in sharing out something that you heard in your breakout room, that would be it'd be fabulous to hear from 3 or 4 of you. Because I can talk, but I want to hear from y'all first. That would be really fabulous. Jason, why don't you kick us off?
Well, one of the things that came up a couple different times was the bumper stickers and signs that are blatantly racist, that we're seeing more prevalence of over the last year in this community, in this region, and that's cause for concern. And that's something that was striking to me because I'm seeing it too, but almost everybody in the group had an example of seeing a bumper sticker, seeing an etching on a window that let them know that the racism is there. It might be quiet, but it's it exists.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Kelly, go ahead.
Hi. Well, first off, thank you for so much time with that. Our group really, I think, got a lot out of it. But one of the things that came up as our conversation cycled was just the reminder that for folks who have had experiences when taking off, trying to take off masks in the past that have been really negative or kind of traumatic, that really sticks with people. And so when we think about, what are we doing as an institution for our students and for our staff to build a place that people can be comfortable doing that, it's just so much more complicated, because it's not just, are you comfortable at this moment? It's what happened, last time you did that, or like a faculty member in our group mentioned, if they, folks carry with them, past educational experiences, positive or negative. So there's just so much there to try to work through and overcome, and not just as simple as saying, we're a safe place, you can do that.
Yeah, that's really good. That's so good. So good. Anybody else have things they would like to share with the group? Love to hear from a couple other breakout rooms if you'd be willing.
Yeah, I don't know how to do the hand raise feature.
Okay, go ahead. You're good.
My name's James. One of the things that really struck me from our conversation was this idea that sometimes we're prompted by those around us to take off our masks, and we don't always know the motivations for that. And especially the less well we know someone, that's not necessarily, whereas sometimes in the long run, we would love to take off some of these masks when we're in the right spaces, but that to be forced or even to be just asked to take off masks is not really the way it should work. That from a sense of agency and autonomy, we should get to choose when our masks come off. And so that sort of questioning others, perhaps about identities, especially if we don't know them really well, is not a way of relating to, and is not a way of sort of showing appreciation, as I think sometimes it gets thought of, perhaps. But that we really need to get to know people first, and then allow them to choose when they want to share aspects of their identity or shed some masks for us.
That's so good. Relationship first. That's really beautiful. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. That's good. Because you got to have that trust, right? I mean, that's powerful. Yeah. Someone else.
See, Erin, I also can't find the
Go ahead.
raise
Just
hand
go ahead.
thing. But yeah, Erin and I, we were in the same breakout room, but I just want to make a quick sort of second degree comment where this Zoom meeting and the breakout sessions is the first time as a faculty member where I've gotten to talk about race in a group of people that was majority people of color instead of being mostly white, and then one or two of us are not white in the group. So having greater than like 40% of the group of the breakout room being POC fundamentally transformed how I was able to, it changed what safety looked for me in being in that group and sharing and masking or not. And the conversation would have been a lot different without that, I think. So I just wanted to say that, make that observation, and to just let people know that it made a really big difference, large positive difference for me, and that's not trivial, and that like randomly doing the breakout rooms isn't always productive. But yeah, I really liked getting to talk about being brown with other brown women in the class today.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? Just go ahead and unmute yourself. If you can't find the hand raise feature, just do it.
I think in my group, it was amazing to hear not necessarily about masks, but people's experience where they had been discriminated against or some of their experiences where they felt, like we had one young lady who was talking about just walking down the road being catcalled at. We had another gentleman who was talking about how some of the things he was picked on for essentially wearing certain clothing because he was becoming a break dancer. So just to hear people who supposedly are not of color talk about ways that they have been either picked on or harassed or discriminated against, and just to see kind of the need for empathy, to see where, there can be transparency, even though we're not all going through the exact same thing, but it is still a huge need for us to be there for one another. So kudos to everyone who was in my group, and we got cut off just before. So Al, I was saying to you, anytime you want to have coffee or lunch or whatever, let's get together and do it.
I'm up for that.
So just a little from our breakout room, I think just to kind of build off of what some of the others have said is we did talk about those experiences, but also being brave enough and courageous enough to take that first step to make that connection and that relational piece so that others feel comfortable enough to be willing to take off their mask, not necessarily be told, but to be willing to, and trying to create that space and figure out what that space looks like to allow for people to just have a safe place. And we really talked a lot about it being a relational thing and a connection thing. And, how do we connect with our students, but how do we connect with our faculty, and how do we connect in that positions that we each hold, whether it's in the school or outside of the school. And so we just really kind of walked through a ton of that. And so big kudos to you all for setting this up and for allowing us to be in a breakout room that we could really just have some real conversations and get to know some of the people that we work with here, but maybe haven't even ever seen before. So thanks for that.
That's powerful. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll just jump in real quick. I want to thank my group. We had a really great conversation. And one thing that came up is the need for self-reflection. Particularly for those of us who are in dominant groups. We're not going to make any change until we do a lot of self-reflection and do our own work.
That's so good. Yeah, that's really good.
And in our group, we kind of had the opposite arrangement of Kayla's group. And so we did talk about times when we've had to put on a mask, but then we stopped and not everybody even shared what it was, but and considered times when we've been complicit in forcing masks on other people. So that was, I had an amazing group. Thanks, everybody.
That's
I think
powerful.
out there.
Thank you.
I'll just jump in. I was really inspired by our group, and it was wonderful to connect with everybody in there. And, one of the things that we talked about is, not just getting to this place of taking the masks off, and breathing, which is like zero, right? That's like the baseline that we need to get to. But how do we get to a space of, marginalized identities really thriving? Like, what does that look like? And so we started having a conversation about, what we all need from each other to be able to show up in that space. Things like not just being like, how are you? Good, I'm fine, great, moving on to the next thing, but like really just throwing a little more heart into that. Like, how are you? Pause, right?
Yeah.
And letting somebody really authentically answer that. Like, so I got excited about just, as we walk more into this space of uncomfortability, with each other, what could happen if we all start to really show up in our full authentic selves? The world will be a better place.
That's so good. Any last thoughts? I don't want to cut anyone off. I want to give everybody opportunity.
I just want to say again, thank you so much for the amount of time that we got to share in our groups. I think that really allowed us time to get to know each other a little bit more and just and give people more time to reflect and process as they shared.
Oh, good. So I may have read this poem the very first time that I was with you, but I'm going to read it again because I think it absolutely is appropriate here. It's a poem that was written by Marianne Williamson, but made famous by Nelson Mandela when he read it at his inauguration. I think it speaks to this moment right now that we're in, to breathing, to masks, to all of it. So I want you to just listen for the connection to the conversations you've just had. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We are born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So I think what I would encourage you to think about as we move out of this space, I want to, getting back to that reflection piece that was just mentioned now, I want you to think about, for those of you in positions of authority, whether that's a classroom instructor or you're in administration at the university, for you, I want you to think about what can you do to create spaces where more people can be their authentic selves? What can you do intentionally to take down some of the barriers that are causing people to feel like they need to wear masks every day? For all of you, what can you do to live more authentically for yourself, especially those of you that have more agency? How can you use that? I often say, you know, we don't get to choose the skin we're in or the body we're in, but we do get to choose how we show up in that skin and that body. And so how can you use whatever agency you have to be your most authentic self, and then create spaces intentionally for other people to be able to be their most authentic self. So I want you to think about, between now and the next time, or between now and November, what could you do to have this conversation with another group of people? So I'm going to encourage you to find, whether it's classmates, whether it's other colleagues who weren't here today, whether it's your family, what could you do to have this conversation somewhere else, to create a space to have these talks about breathing and masks with other people? But then also, what can you do as part of the SPSCC community to really create space for others to show up and really be able to step into their full selves? Because SPSCC will only become its best self when everyone can show up as their full self. And so what's your role in that? What's your role in that? And each of you has a different role to play in that. And so that's my my ask for us as we leave this space. Again, who could you have a similar conversation with? Who could you convene in a Zoom call or in your own home to have this conversation again, to continue the conversation? And then what can you do in the role that you play to make sure that you get to show up as your best self, but also those around you can show up and be their best selves? And where can you interrupt when you walk into a store and you see someone being treated in a way that causes them to put on? How could you interrupt on those daily encounters in the coffee shop, at the store, all of that? Because I think when that becomes natural, when we walk into a store and we see someone being treated or talked to in a particular, when we're stepping there, that's when we know like we've really arrived, right? And so just to be more aware now as you move through the world, how can I take this learning even beyond the walls, the space of SPSCC, into my world beyond that? So thank you again for joining. Parfait, I'm going to pass it back to you. Thanks for allowing me to be part of these conversations. I feel this gives me so much life, so much more fun than other stuff I have to do. So Yay, SPSCC. Thank you, Parfait.
Please, everybody, can you just join me virtually to just thank Erin for this great facilitation today. And you know, sister, I see you. Thank you for joining our institution on this journey to just create a space where we all can authentically show up so that I love how you said, unless we can all show up authentically, our best work and best selves won't be there. So, and that's what we want. We want our best selves here in order to serve our students and so that their best selves can come into the classroom and so that they can reach their potential. So thank you for journeying in with us. So it sounds like folks were really happy with the time allocation here. So we'll aim to have a similar format. For the rest of our time, I just wanted to draw your attention on something that I had talked about during our in-service, our kickoff week. It was the launch of the employee resource groups, also known as affinity groups. As we talk about, right, this theme of creating spaces, being intentional by creating spaces or allowing spaces where people can show up authentically. One way of doing that, even though that's not the only way, because in my dream world, I don't think we should need affinity groups, right? I would want for every space to be a place where people feel like they belong, they can be their authentic selves. But affinity groups are one way to start creating spaces where people feel comfortable and addressing and talking about issues that matter for them and take action from there. And so one way, our institution obviously is committed to supporting that. And so we've launched these in the fall. And so I want to walk all of us through the process of starting one. It's open to everyone, anyone. If you have a keen group of folks, and the themes can range from mental health to being identity-based, to being kind of an interest towards, let's say, there's some colleges who have a anti-racist, cohort of allies, having an affinity group so that they can do work together. So the sky's the limit in terms of the creativity there and what you can create as an affinity group. But I want to walk us through the process of doing so and inviting each one of you to think about other things or areas or topics or hobbies or things that you're passionate about that you would want to create an employee resource group around and be supported through funding to be able to put out events or do some activities on our campus to engage our community further. And so let me share my screen here and walk you all through the steps. So we have this brand new page on our website titled Diversity and Equity page. And one way to get to it is when you land onto the SPSCC main website, and you scroll to the bottom of the site under About SPSCC. On the left-hand side of the screen, there's a section, Diversity and Equity. And when you select that, there are a number of great resources that are available to you. And under Staff Diversity Resources, that's where we have housed the information about the employee resource groups. And there's all you need to know about what they are, what's the intention behind them, and how do you form one? What are the requirements and the processes to doing so? And there's an application link that is right there. So for those in position of leadership, I would encourage you and invite you to share that with your team members and encourage them to sign up and create some affinity groups. And for everybody else, just take advantage of this. It's an opportunity to create small, cohorts of like-minded individuals around things that we're passionate about as we're moving towards creating a space of belonging for all. So that was the announcement that I had for us. And before I, kind of have us go our separate ways, I certainly want to pause a little bit and hear if there are any comments from anyone based on the work we've done today. Any comments, last minute comments, reflections on what we've discussed so far, or even questions related to the employee resource groups. It looks like it was as clear as water. Okay, well, if there aren't any other comments, I want to thank you all for showing up to this conversation, and we'll send more information for the upcoming one in November. And for those of you who've signed up for the book reading around anti-racism, we'll see you in about an hour and a half for the conversation about how to be an anti-racist. Thank you so very much, and have a good rest of your day.